then you can make data-driven attacks. So what we saw in Spain last summer, for example, was like a lot of uncoordination or misaligned behavior between a lot of actors. What we see is to bring in assets and to build an infrastructure is of much more value, because with those infrastructure, you can participate on the energy markets, which are still a high yield market. Why shouldn't we all participate in owning this a bit more than just by paying those companies that earn a lot with it, but become active shareholders and give some revenue back? AI mega factories expected to be built up, so there will be much more energy consumption in the future, and there will be much more demand, and maybe there will also be some scarcity. Maybe that's also how energy can be more related to Bitcoin in terms of value.
Hello everyone. Today we're diving into the part of decentralized physical infrastructure that most people gloss over: the messy intersection of hardware, regulation, energy markets, and crypto-native economics. Our guest is Jürgen Eckel, CEO of Riddle&Code, one of the few companies building real production-grade infrastructure where physical assets, machines, and blockchains meet. Jürgen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nazar, for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Perfect. So you've been deep in cybersecurity, hardware, and blockchain long before DePIN, right, became a buzzword. What problem did you see early on that made you commit to the idea of machine verifiable trust?
Well, that's a good question. I have a background in cybersecurity, and a lot of systems lack, I wouldn't say a root of trust, but an anchor of trust somewhere. And I think blockchain technology in general is it's a perfect anchor to verify trust amongst actors, right, or between actors. And I think that's very intriguing. And the idea to connect machines to the economy or the value chain of trust is very appealing to me. And I think this is a very awesome foundation for trustworthy interactions and value chains.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the state of real-world infrastructure at the moment. People in crypto often assume real-world systems are slow and outdated. What do they misunderstand most about how physical infrastructure actually works?
I think that the foundation in crypto is the transactionability, right? So transactions are quick and can be made immediately. In the real world, especially in industries, it takes a bit of time, but I think the value that's brought with digitalization and transactionability there is even bigger. So I think the first steps are slow, but when it takes up, there's a lot of value that can be generated and brought to the economy and to the processes. And so I think initially it's slow, but then I think a lot of value will be generated, and I think we are approaching this and becoming closer to it, closer than 2018 when we started.
Okay. And what's the biggest economic illusion in the tokenization narrative?
Everything has to be only tokenized and tradable. One of the major aspects of distributed ledger technology for me is also the notarization of aspects. Right? Mm-hmm. You can handle this as a token, but the real value is the notarization of a state and to be able to verify it. Mm-hmm. And I think this is even more important with respect to machines or machine economy and to establish trust.
And which token model looks elegant on the whiteboard, but dies instantly in the moment it meets a regulator?
I think it's when you try to reflect token or some real world mechanics that are actually only traded in the real world, but not on the crypto space. I think there were some energy brokers that tried to do that, and the problem there is you build up a parallel system that is totally detached, and you could replicate it, but just by replicating it, you don't bring the value in because the value is still defined on the other system, the real world system. And I think we have to avoid these types of parallelism to some extent. It has to be has to get initially also the real value and the real anticipation by the industry itself. I think these are very difficult, right? And other than that, from my point of view, a lot of infrastructure or DePIN or some DePIN projects got created that were very appealing. Also did a lot of infrastructure buildup, but the token system was like not working as expected, so they collapsed over a period of time. I think it has to be very carefully designed and exploited so that there is also a real world application to it, not just a network where everyone tries to benefit from, but there is a real connection to the industries or to the economy, so that this value is also funded by some real world activities and not just by virtual or token economics that then are based on nothing.
Energy markets are volatile, political, and deeply regulated, which makes them a perfect stress test. Why is energy the first place where decentralized physical infrastructure becomes unavoidable?
I think because of all the PV installations that are around, right? It's decentralized setup. However, most of them don't participate in the real energy market, right? They try to work for themselves. At the same time, energy. So the regulation from EU-wide regulation actually focuses on deregulation or decentralization, even though it doesn't name it like it should be decentralized, but it's decoupling grid operators from the utilities, but also incentivizes and forces them to be more resilient by decentralized approaches. Yeah? And I think that's why this is very interesting. So, and we're just in it at this moment to focus and get it even more decentralized. That's how we frame it from blockchain technology, right? And I think that's why this is it's kind of a sweet spot right now.
So it's already decentralized. It's just what it's lacking is a proper integration of the tech, right? And the way I understand it, and maybe even philosophy, right? The logic, understanding.
Yeah. So the big utilities, they are afraid of their stake, so to say. They're not that very interested in decentralization. At the same time, there's a lot of generation of PV or electricity generation, but also storage that can be brought up very quickly in a decentralized way. And I think there's a solution for the future of the grid, because everyone is talking about extending a grid and there will be huge costs, but I think there are two ways of doing it. One is to invest heavily into it and to rebuild it from scratch with new copper lines, which will be super expensive, or by giving it more intelligence. And I think that's the smarter way to go for, and that's what we try to support.
And from the business side, they don't lose much, right? Because they can tokenize their assets, right? So
yeah. Instead of tokenizing the energy, which is kind of imminent, that means like you can measure it, what you generate and consume, but on the lines it's everywhere. It is all the time. So it's more about the assets and to actually tokenize what they produce or store, their productivity, so to speak. And so that's what we do. Yeah. And so we try to build this infrastructure and to support DSOs to build out infrastructure in a more resilient way.
Mm-hmm. And so the next logical topic to discuss is deployments, right? We already kind of touched upon it.
Yeah.
What's the most unexpected failure you encountered in real deployments? Something you could never have predicted from an office?
Oh yeah, it's very interesting, but it's like those simple things that you don't think about. So when we first started interacting with energy communities, where I was on the countryside or in a city, so we thought, oh, let's connect all those smart meters that are out there. And yeah, actually the connecting was the issue, right? So to get the data out from the basement to the rooftop or to the internet, these are core issues, right? If you want to have a microgrid with households and the people swap off or switch off their internet connections when they go to vacation, these are issues where you stop monitoring and gaining visibility into your microgrid or your energy community. That's when things fall to collapse or start to collapse if you are based on connectivity. And I think also DSOs rely on connectivity. So what the data they see, they get over power line or 5G. But for example, last summer in Spain, if there's no electricity for 5G, you won't get any data, right? So you need a much more resilient infrastructure that might not rely on a centralized grid or power supply, right? And maybe also not on 5G, because this will be off if there's something like that. So luckily there are the satellites that you can connect over, and this is one way of a resilience that we work with.
You mentioned satellites. Do you think that's exactly what we need at the moment, or we just need to patiently wait until the infrastructure just becomes better?
No, I think that it depends on what's your requirement as a DSO. But if you want to prepare for operational visibility of your decentralized energy assets, you, even in the case of a blackout, you have to rely on satellites, because 5G only won't help you. So we have some low power wide area connectivity technology that we uplink into the internet via 5G or Starlink, right? Mm-hmm. So that in the case of blackout, you have the option to use it will swap or opt into Starlink and send data over it, right? So that this then will give you visibility for your grid, and thereby helping you to recover from the blackout, for example.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, what does 99.9% uptime actually mean when the machines involved have no margin for error? But we kind of touched upon it, really, right? And we mentioned Starlink. Could you please tell me more about this? Because that would be a highlight.
Yeah. So, it's just a building block, right? But let's just imagine. So usually, if you go to service level agreements, you opt for 99.9999. And the more 9 you want, the more expensive it gets. But there we are. So with 5G, if you focus on the energy sector and you rely on 5G, most likely some of those connectivity issues might be solved by additional power supply to the base station of 5G as well. Who knows? Yeah, and in Spain it wasn't the case. So, and especially if a lot of people start using that, so we said let's build up our gateway stations and base stations with 5G and Starlink to be more resilient. And that's where the 99.9% come in place. That we even have a failover procedure in these cases, or for example, also if 5G fails, right? So,
so Starlink,
it's exactly what we talked about before, but yeah, just to make it more explicit.
Yeah, and my logical conclusion is that Starlink is not just saving people in the war zones, for example, but also can save the whole planet if the grid goes down, right? So
yeah, true. So in this case, it would give connectivity if there is no power, right? And that's it's a different layer of infrastructure, that we might rely on. And it must not be, it doesn't have to be Starlink. It can be, but there could be also other satellite operators that we could use. It's just one of the first.
There are also risks imposed, right? Because there is the over-dependency at some point. And it feels like we're more towards that.
True. So and that's why right now we have 5G and Starlink. It could be different. So, but
diversification.
It's just one option at this point. But it's I think if you want to level up your availability in corner cases, that's one option to increase it.
Okay, what's the most dangerous thing a device can lie about, and how do you prevent that lie?
I think just delivering data, it doesn't matter so much. Yeah, but if it controls a lot, it can be much more important, right? So if you have an atomic power plant, and there's a main controller, you want to have it, you want to rely on it. But so what we focus with our technology and the proof of productivity is the integrity and authenticity of those devices. Yeah, it can be tempered, but it's increasing the more secure you make it. Yeah, and what we also do we have some kind of central fingerprinting of the base station so that you can't remove them. So I think with regards to all of these data, it's about the integrity and authenticity of the device and the control mechanisms. And if someone wants to temper the data that those sensors are using, you can most likely do it with some effort and investment and money. But usually what we also see is gathering more data and observing much more. You will find out with all of the data evidence that this might be misaligned data. Yeah. So the devices that we build right now or that we connect to are usually smart meters or inverters that transform or take care about the transmission of PV and or battery storage data, and on top of that, also devices that aggregate data in households and facilities to monitor data consumption and production. So we monitor or connect, monitor and control devices on different levels. That means grid level, microgrid level, facilities and household level, and optimize the energy utilization there by load balancing or peak shielding.
What's a data integrity failure you've seen that would terrify a grid operator?
In general, it's not so much one single integrity mechanisms. I would say the difference. So if you don't have this, and all of our processes are data driven. Yeah, it means it's the same for AI. It's very data driven. But as you also have a lot of synthesized AIs or synthetic data, it's very different if you can prove that this data is real data, then you can trust it much more. And then it gives you much bigger evidence about what you're actually seeing in this data and the analysis of the data. And I think that's where I would put the focus. If a single data point is wrong, I don't care so much. So we have sample rates below 1 minute, right? So if a single data point is wrong or 3 or 5, 2-3 minutes later, it should be fine again, right? So if we measure integrity of data, it's not so bad. If it's over a longer period of time, that's a different story, But then we even can detect that. So it's more about to prove that large time series of data are authentic, right? And and can be processed as expected.
What should be notarized on chain and what should never touch a ledger?
I think the data points themselves, because it's with all the if you made the whole economy transparent, it would collapse because everyone would just bid below, the opponent, and then the value generation bottles down to zero, close to zero profits. Yeah, so this is something, it's very difficult. So what we found out early on with consortiums, right, where even opponents or competitors work together, they want to notarize data and they won't be able to prove that this data got notarized, but they don't want to reveal it on chain. Yeah. So what we have in place is you can unreveal the data or disclose the data or decrypt it or hand over decryption keys for transaction, but it's not decrypted or unencrypted on chain. It's encrypted on chain, so that actions become transparent, but not the details of them.
We're talking about on-chain activity, but which chain?
Oh, so we work with liquid section of Bitcoin for the assets itself, the tokens. A lot of data we notarize on a Cosmos derivative. It's called Plant Mint that we've been developing since a few years. And there we do a lot of these kind of interactions and connect to tokens or stable coins, Bitcoin on liquid blockchain. Initially, we worked on because it was like we've been with them since 2018-19 when they launched, and we liked the idea of colored tokens. And it's very easy to generate the assets on the fly, new assets. That's what we do for each asset, so to speak. And then we just can connect all this stuff in a very easy way without a complexity of contracts, which gives us ease of operation.
Every DePIN project claims to be crypto native, yet most fail the moment they touch the physical world. What separates projects that survive real world friction, right, as they call it, from the ones that collapse on contact?
Yeah, I think it's a bit related to what we talked initially about. It's the real world purpose. So there have been a lot of DePIN and other projects that that scaled with bots or transactions themselves, the amount of transactions, and it's very easy to just create a machine that just creates transactions, but it has to be a meaningful or real transaction that is connected to value generation somehow, right? And I think as this starts or as this goes, that's separating a lot of projects. Yeah. So, for example, I think we also initially tried to do energy trading, so in a peer-to-peer fashion between owners of a facility. And I think this is theoretically a very interesting project, but it lacks the impact of the practical impact, because the value behind a usual household, what they can save or transact with some kilowatt hours that are usually not that much. It's by a low margin, so 20 cents here or 5 to 10 cents maybe, because the credit fee is much higher than the energy price. And then the question, who cares about this, right? The smaller amounts of money, right? I would, not so much people, yeah. So I think it's a very difficult incentive, because also the tokens, you can't really create a token out of you can create a token out, right? But it will lack the missing a word, but it will lack the volatility, so to speak, right? Because it's bound to the real world asset of a kilowatt hour value, right? Mm-hmm. And this will then not drive in that much users, right? So that's something you can't directly connect on this kind of a small level. And I think that's very difficult then to use and to make. So this was also learning for us. So there has to be much more value behind in order to make it interesting for stakeholders or to actors around it. And that's why we moved further and continued building and looking for use cases that make sense.
Mm-hmm. And this decentralized infrastructure always has a kill switch, even if nobody talks about it. Who holds that power in your system today, and who should hold it 5 years from now?
So, so in our system, so as I think you're referring to the Riddle Foundation that's currently hosting the blockchain for that, what we use, right? That right. At this point in time, it's the stewards of them. Yeah, there's the foundation. It's a limited party of people. However, so we anticipate to move this over to the actors that start using the network and start building it, right? And I think that's where all of those nodes come in, right? So the node operators, and we try to anticipate how different battery or microgrid operators gonna participating could hold elements of it, like nodes, right? Yeah, so we don't have a final plan for this, but it's in the working, and so we got a good feedback so far about it.
Okay. If machines become economic actors, someone ends up shaping the monetary policy of machine economies. Is that governments, corporations, networks, or whoever controls the hardware root of trust?
I think these are two different things for me, yeah, because the machines, they have to comply with legislation, right? So it's a heavily regulated market, the energy market. Also, finance market is regulated more than it was before for crypto too. So this is moving. So, but all the actors that are acting within the scope or this field have to be compliant. So, who's regulating it is the legislator, right? The regulator, the legislation, and the regulator. But what we can do is the machines have to comply, of course, and this will also have an impact on the sector and the economies of it, right? And this will evolve and change them, and I think that's can't be. But this is the same for finance, for example, where crypto had a heavy impact on, and where regulators kept up and now try to also involve themselves.
So eventually, that would be a government imposing rules on corporation networks and so on and so forth, and those are the ones responsible by the end of the day.
Yes, but the root of trust, for example, in our case, is always the operator and those that operate have the machines, the owners, but they have to take care that they act within legal means.
Energy data may become more valuable than the energy itself. Who ultimately owns it?
The Data Act, which got launched this September, has a clear answer. So the users and owners own their data. The operators might use it. Nevertheless, the data, at this point in time, I think the energy is already not as paid as much as for the grid infrastructure, right? So you will pay much more for grid infrastructure in the future. At the same time, those infrastructure will rely on the data. They have to they will much more rely on data to be intelligent infrastructure. And with intelligent infrastructure, there will be options, and the goal is to make it cheaper than just rebuilding the infrastructure. Make this intelligence part of the rebuild, and I think the data will be important, and help the grid operators out, and maybe also the utilities from have to have too much investment into the physical infrastructure itself.
Okay. And what's the catastrophic attack scenario? Almost nobody in the industry is preparing for, but you think it's inevitable. Just interesting.
So my feeling is, so the attack scenario is like, so if it's data driven, you can make data driven attacks. Yeah. So right now, so what we saw in Spain last summer, for example, was like a lot of uncoordination or misaligned behavior between a lot of actors. on the grid side, maybe also those on the utility side. Yeah, at least that's what I read. Yeah, so having this spread out a bit on the data. So if you make it data driven, you have to be sure about all the data that you process. So if there is data attacks or data injection on this, it might be vulnerability. But I think that's why also the physical infrastructure with regards to the authenticity and the integrity of the data is important, right? Because if you then can identify, there is some data which I can't rely upon, I should reject it into my, or not, anticipate it for my data processings. That's a very important decision. And thereby you could hopefully make it much more reliable and avoid these attacks.
And will energy tokens ever capture value beyond pure utility? Or is speculation structurally incompatible with the sector?
Or there's a connection on how we finance energy. Yeah. At the same time, and we want to bring in stable coins and also Bitcoin collaterals, right? Which is from a regulation point of view a bit more difficult. Yeah. But to have 1 kilowatt hour be a token, it's a bit more this exact a non-fungible token is very difficult. At the same time, I think what we see is to bring in assets and to build an infrastructure is of much more value, because with those infrastructure, you can participate on the energy markets, which are still a high yield market or high yield markets. Yeah. And from that, you get much more revenue, I think. And that's a differentiation that we saw over time. But still, this is connected to energy. But as energy has different prices for what it's used for example, on some energy on the arbitrage market, the next day ahead market and the intraday, you have different prices for energy depending on when you trade it. But and then you also have the frequency reserve where you get paid a lot more when certain energy is consumed or given to the network to reserve the frequency. And given on that, it's very difficult to reflect this on tokens because it's going so quickly. Yeah. So those traders doing the action, right? It's high volatile, highly. There's a high volatility.
Point, right?
Yeah, it feels like, at least from my point of view. But then what you see then is, actually I don't know in this extent if it's higher or not. But what I want to say is when we take a period of time, for example, 1 day or month, yeah, and then see the yield of that, yeah, and give this then back to the operators of the facility of the battery storage systems, for example, then we see a high yield, which is much more, which is then compared on the finance market, yeah, usually. And that's very attractive for finance, and that's why we try to link this, yeah. And but how we do this, we link it via stablecoins right now, but because we see this as the only legit way for on and off ramping with traditional institutions, right, and traditional markets. But see, this is a solid aspect on how, more people can participate in those high yield markets.
And where does the yield come from, for those who don't understand what we're talking about?
Yeah. So the yield comes from, the demands of the grid and to operators, but most likely of the grid. So what you right now can earn, so let's say you have, per year, you have a 1 megawatt battery storage system. Yeah? You operate for 1 year. On the day ahead market or arbitrage market, you get, let's say, you just to make a number, roughly 90K. Yeah. However, on markets like the carbon credits and frequency reserve, you can pump it up to 200 to 300K per year. In the combined market segment. Each of those markets are again a bit fragmented again, yeah. And I'm not an expert on those markets, But we work with partners to generate this yield. And and these yields, especially from the frequency reserve market, right, or restoration market, are then used to generate this. And how does this happen? This is when the grid operators realize, we have too much or too less energy, and some people saved energy or capacity to take over energy. So the frequency, which is usually anticipated to be at 50 hertz, right, is above or below those 50 hertz. And it's very important that this keeps on roughly at the same 50 hertz, or the same frequency. And that's what you're paid for much more, because this is the grid stability. If this exceeds too much, the grid infrastructure will fail. The transformers, they're going to fail. You will have to replace them at one point. Again, I'm not so much into all the details of the grid infrastructure itself. So what I learned over the last year is these are services you get paid for a lot.
Which use case becomes the Uniswap of Energy, and why hasn't it existed yet?
So those people, you have to pay fees and market entry fees, and you have to be accredited to trade on those places, And I think a lot of companies do that, They're just they're big, so we also don't do this ourselves because we are too small for that. And we lack expertise, But we partner up with people doing that, and they're happy to connect new infrastructure to it, So it's initially they were called virtual power plants, and there are some around Europe, And what they essentially do, they create virtual power plants from all their users or the assets that they allowed to have under operation or management. And these, I think this concept is kind of attractive, and they became popular the last years.
But it's not happening fully like decentralized. Fully decentralized way. So there is no exactly like in Uniswap of Energy thing.
Yeah,
and we shouldn't expect that, right? So it's not fact to happen.
No, I think we would love to something like that, but at this point in time, as it could be for example, what I could imagine is as we go, and so we work on a concept or the idea to get the infrastructure for battery energy storage systems funded for individuals, or that more people can participate in that, and having those also tokenized, you could change or transfer those tokens and then prove ownership, and thereby participate in the revenues, in the yields of that. And it could be something like that. So we also think if you earn the yield from those assets, we see this comes back as stablecoin to you, and you could reinvest this directly into DeFi, and we imagine you could also again reinvest this into new assets that we can deploy.
What's one belief you hold about decentralized infrastructure that most of the industry would disagree with?
We all pay taxes, right? And I think so. We all own this infrastructure, but I see me only paying for it, right? So why shouldn't we all participate in owning this a bit more than just by paying those companies that earn a lot with it, but become active shareholders and give some revenue back?
Yeah, it makes sense.
I think those don't see it like that.
Of course, I can understand that, right? It's understandable in a way.
Yeah.
But your your point is quite valid. Let's talk about regulations, but not much. Just one question, right? So you operate inside some of the strictest regulatory environments in Europe. Is regulation slowing things down actually, or is it quietly forcing the industry to build more trustworthy systems?
Yeah, in this case, I think it's actually breaking up the old systems, right? So we first got the separation between grid operator and utility, and now they are even forced to, allow more decentralization. I think this is helping us right now, and we see it in all the markets. I have the feeling also it's a bit like the ISPs in 2000. So before 2000, ISPs had a major role, right? And then they became, there were virtual ISPs, and it became much more easier to connect internet. The prices fell, and right now I think they earn much more about additional services than the value of the internet connection, right? Because every year you get more for what you pay, right? So you pay the same price, but you get more connectivity and everything. Yeah. And then the next thing was like
internet service provider.
Excuse. I'm sorry.
It's
yeah. And then the same was true for mobile phones, right? Or mobile connectivity. Initially, it was super expensive. Then, and you also have virtual mobile operators, right? And I feel like for energy markets, it's the same way, and it's just starting.
Once assets such as solar panels, meters, and batteries can cryptographically prove what they are and what they do, who becomes a participant in energy markets that wasn't before?
Let's talk about aggregate assets in this case, because it's the PV park or the PV park and the battery park, so to speak. And I think those are then the assets. And I hope that more people can co-own or be part of, or will be enabled to own fractions of that, so that they can participate on those markets. So right now, everyone tries to curtail solar and PV energy, right? At the same point, AI mega factories are expected to be built up. So there will be much more energy consumption in the future.
Exactly.
Energy will be much more expensive from my point of view. Maybe just because of the grid infrastructure, but maybe also because there will be much more demand, and maybe there will also be some scarcity. And maybe that's also how energy can be more related to Bitcoin in terms of value.
Exactly. And then it can really be can become an asset. It can become an asset which we will talk about way more frequently everywhere, and you will see in the headlines as well. And as you said, it will be treated like it can, because of the scarcity again, and it can be treated as an asset that appreciates in price over time, right?
Yeah, and as we go for a decentralized distribution of, for example, storage systems, people on the countryside, they have the space to have all those decentralized storage systems, and they right now they can, and they also have much more easier access to it. Because they might have more PV plants, and I think that's a very interesting aspect. So we also saw that communities, right? So just smaller cities on the countryside, they have a lot of people leaving them. At the same time, they have a much bigger funding issue. So this might be a very attractive way for them to have a recurring revenue.
Let's paint the uncomfortable version of 2030. What happens if we don't build verifiable machine identities and decentralized trust?
If we don't have the trust into machines, and also there would not the secure control of them, I think it's becoming much more difficult, because what we've seen with hacking and governance or state-driven attacks, we've seen in the Ukraine war, for example, it's much more important to have resilient machines or machines that you can rely on the communication with, right? And we've also, and EU, even though, sometimes there are a lot of over-regulations in various aspects, but there's also the Cyber Resilience Act and NIS2, and they very heavily state that critical infrastructure has to be encrypted data in rest and transit, right? You have to have a secure anchor there. Let's not frame like that. But what we also do see, we work with companies and critical infrastructure that have been more analogous before, and we help them to comply with the Cyber Resilience Act, which has to have those security mechanisms in place by the end of 2027 on the hardware layer, right? Hardware and software layer. And we help them to achieve that. And how do we do that? We do that with our technology that we developed for the crypto industry. Yeah. And what I see, if EU wouldn't do that, it would be much more prone to attacks and therefore misinformation and destabilization of democracy, I would say, right? Because that's my impression right now. Democracies are very heavily under attack from misinformation, right? And fear and uncertainty, and this will increase. And I think as a counter mechanism, those basic mechanisms that are going for secure identity, authenticity, integrity, trust, those are the core building blocks for these aspects, and I think that's very important in the future.
And what if we? So let me ask that question that you suggested. So let's come back and again, let's imagine that assets such as solar panels, meters, batteries can create graphically prove that what they are and what they do. And we realize that, and it's logical to assume that common folk, right, becomes a market participant, and we have these villages, we have so we have the ground for that. But what if we don't move towards that?
I think it will just become more expensive, right? Because if the grid is not decentralizing as much, everything will stay. Yeah, everything will start. Everything will stick to central entities, big entities, and to actually have this, we would have to have much more copper cables to be replaced, right? And I think that's the unintelligent or not so smart solution, because if you make the grid or the assets much more smarter and coordinate them in like a swarm intelligence, right? And you learn doing that, then you can avoid those much more expensive investments that rely just on real physical infrastructure. And by doing batteries, for example, here I'm a big proponent for that, and intelligent connectivity, visibility and control, you can reduce those raw or focus on physical improvements only solution, and save money and speed up.
And conversely, what does the world look like when machines can trade, coordinate, and optimize without human permission?
There's still regulation, and it's like with driving cars. I don't love driving cars, so every once in a while I visit, for example, my mom in Western Germany. So it's a 800-kilometer ride, and I would prefer to read during that ride or do nice stuff. So if there would be a solution for that, I'm in.
Where is the best place for listeners to find you and follow Riddle&Code's work?
Oh yeah, well, it's our website, riddle&code.com, and of course LinkedIn and Twitter, right? So you can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter, and also Tom Fürstner he's tweeting a lot. Oh, not Twitter, but X, right? I'm looking forward to.
I will include
with that.
those. Yes, I will include those links in the descriptions everywhere. Thanks for exploring the future of machine trust, energy markets, decentralized infrastructure. And to everyone listening or watching, like, subscribe, or follow, and share this episode with someone curious.